morning. How's everybody today? Great. Me too. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl today. No, we're not. The Seahawks were in it. We talked about the Super Bowl, but there's two teams I don't care about that much. So we'll talk instead about the Incarnation of Spirit. Does that sound better? All right. So we're exploring this year the idea of creating a world that works for all. And so our topic today is the Incarnation of Spirit. And it comes from Ernest Holmes' What We Believe. And he says, we believe in the incarnation of the Spirit in everyone, and that all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. If I would correct that at all, I would say all of life is an incarnation of the one Spirit. Everything is an incarnation of the one Spirit. Now, the word incarnation has a root of carne. And if you go into a Mexican restaurant and you order something that has carne on it in the menu, what do you get? Meat, right? Okay. So when we say the incarnation, we mean the moving of the word or spirit into meat. That's us. Flesh. When it says in the Bible the word was made flesh, it's the word was incarnated. The word was moved into carnation. We talk of carnal knowledge, knowledge of the flesh, all that root word of that stuff. So, Twyla's way back there. Why aren't you up here? Sorry. The world is out of order. And so the word, spirit, always has the potential to be made flesh. And it needs to, in order to express itself, show up in form. Otherwise, it's just potential energy, right? So it needs to show up. We are incarnations of the Spirit existing and experiencing itself. That's who and what we are. That's why we're here. We get to be Spirit experiencing itself. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. Okay? And we get to be Spirit experiencing ever more and more and more of itself, the really good stuff, which is why we're here in bodies, is to play. So when we do a prayer, we want the results incarnate, don't we? If I'm praying for health, I don't want just the idea of health. I want my body to work better, right? Okay? If I'm praying for a better relationship or a relationship, I don't want just the idea of a relationship. It's so nice. I can visualize a relationship. I want a relationship. I want somebody there that I can, love and hug, and they can hug me and talk to me and all that stuff, right? If we want a car, if we want a job, if we want money, if we want whatever it is, creativity, to create a beautiful piece of art, whatever, we want it incarnate. When we look at our teaching symbol, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's a circle with 3 layers in it. Okay? Top layer is pure spirit. Pure spirit. Middle layer is the mind. This is the way that spirit operates and individuates. And the bottom layer is form. And then we have a V that goes through it, and it's called the descent of spirit into matter. Okay? The top layer, spirit, is invisible, right? The middle layer, mind, is invisible, right? You can't see your mind. You can't see the operation of your mind. You can see your brain, but you can't see your mind. And if you're looking at your own brain, you're probably in trouble. But the form is what we see and sense and experience. We see it, we taste it, we smell it, we get to experience it in form. How do we move from the invisible to the visible? We have to take an action. All that inspiration, all that thought, all that idea that moves through us, we have to then act upon it in form in order to bring that idea into form. So if I have the idea, the divine idea of beauty, which is, let's call that a God quality of beauty, and I want to move it into form as a rose, or that's my idea of beauty, is a rose, I have to do something. I have to plant a rose bush. I have to go out and buy a rose. I have to do something in order to experience rose, right? Okay, pretty simple and basic, but a lot of us get hung up on that. As a friend of mine says, a lot of metaphysicians metaphysal because they don't move from the invisible to the visible. My friend Maria Nemeth, who wrote the book The Energy of Money, calls it trouble at the border. And so we move from the border is where we move from the invisible into the visible. And the visible is a denser form of energy than thought, right? Thought you can just go bam, 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 bam like that, but maybe you've noticed that you think new Ferrari and it doesn't show up in your driveway just like that. You've all tried that, right? Or some variation thereof. Okay? So it takes some time, it takes some energy. And usually it takes longer than our thought process would like. So we have to go through that process of moving it into form. And we are the agents. We are the place where Spirit moves into form. We get to move that word. We get to incarnate that word. We are the word incarnate, but we are also, because we are conscious beings, we are the process that then gets to duplicate the nature of Spirit. That is, to be the creative agents to say, this is what I choose to have in form in my life, right? We're not like a mussel or a clam that just sits at the bottom of the ocean and takes whatever shows up. Okay? We get to choose. We don't always use that get to. That's a joke. You've noticed people who just kind of take whatever shows up in life. But we have the ability to choose and to create what we want. And then to move that into form. The way that many of us work, by the way, there's an old saying, it's called treat and move your feet. Treat is the science of mind term for treatment, spiritual mind treatment, which is the process of altering our consciousness. It's our 5-step prayer, affirmative prayer process, okay? And so we do the 5-step affirmative prayer process. We change our consciousness, and then out of that change, we have to take that action. We have to move our feet. The thing is that many people, not you guys, but many people, move their feet and don't treat. And so we're constantly taking action in the world of effect, trying to manipulate and maneuver things around without ever touching into the mind level, or maybe barely touching into the mind level, and without ever touching into the level of Spirit. Which is why we teach start at the level of Spirit and then move it down, and the last thing we do out of that, then we move. Because then we're moving from a different consciousness, from an expanded consciousness, from a consciousness that is not working in the same old as it did before. When Einstein says that a problem can't be solved at the level of consciousness that created the problem, he's talking about get up into a different level of consciousness, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. And so in order to create a world that works, we have to have a different kind of thinking and a different kind of consciousness than created the world we have. We have to change our consciousness. And then from that, we have to apply that consciousness into form. And so that consciousness takes a deeper understanding of life principles. What does that look like? Thomas Troward, one of our authors we study, writers, thinkers, philosophers we study, who was writing in the early 1900s, talks about ships. For tens of thousands of years, boats were either made of wood or skin. Why? Because both float, right? Take a piece of skin, you lay it on the water, it'll float. Take a piece of wood, lay it on the water, it'll float. What do you take? If you take a piece of iron and lay it on the water, what does it do? Sinks. Okay? So we all know that you can't make ships out of metal. And for as much as 900,000 years, they say the first record of trans-water travel was between a couple of islands out in the South Pacific 900,000 years ago. Think about that for a moment. That wasn't even Homo sapiens, that was Homo erectus at that point in time. But for 900,000 years, we had this process, and 160 years ago, somebody had the brilliant idea and began to understand the idea of volumetric displacement of water and said, hey, wait a minute, it isn't about the material. And made the first iron boat. Now that's getting outside of the normal thinking. For 900,000 years, this is how boats are made, and all of a sudden somebody says, no, let's do it differently. And today, how many wooden boats are out there carrying cargo? Luxury liners, the Queen Mary's all made of wood, right? Or any of those Norwegian cruise ships, right? The great battleships of the world these days. Okay? We don't make boats of wood anymore in large quantities. Yes, we do in small, for small, individuals. But we don't for larger ships. They're all made of metal, steel, things like that. Okay, completely different than what we were doing. And so it's going to take rethinking our present conceived notions of how the world works in order to create a world that works for all. Now, let me ask you a question. Did the principle of how water works, did it change 160 years ago? to suddenly become buoyant for metal? No. If you still take a piece of iron and just prop it on the water, will it still sink? Yeah. Same principle that sinks it will also float it if you understand how to work with it. Okay, so the principles don't have to change. It's how we work with it. Troward calls it the artistic ability of spirit manifest through us to create. We have the ability to be artists. See, an artist looks at something, the same thing that everybody else looks at, and sees something different. Sees something different. How would you like to go through your life this week, looking at the same old stuff, and being willing to see something different? Just as a practice exercise. It doesn't mean you have to turn it into something, but just look and say, is there a different way that I can see this? If I look at the news, is there a different way that I can look at the news? If I look at my money situation, is there a different way that I can look at my money situation? If I look at a friend or a person who bugs me, is there a different way that I can look at that? If I look at my house, my home where I live, is there a different way that I can look at that? If I look at my, anything, my grocery shopping, my food consumption, any aspect of my life, is there a different way? Can I be an artist? Can I see something different? Right now I know several of us are several of you, I'm not, but several of you are in the watercolor class. And I know Cynthia is, and she tells me it's getting her to see the world differently. And I know when I used to be a professional photographer, I saw the world differently. I was always looking at it from a different point of view. I was looking at it as a work of art, and how could I capture that work of art? By the way, eventually I had to break out of that because all I was looking for was photographs, and I wasn't seeing the world as the world. I remember I really got that one day when I'd gone down to the Oregon coast without my cameras with a girlfriend, and it was stormy and it was windy, and there was this particular scene that I saw, and I went, oh my God, I want to capture that scene. So I went back the next day with my camera with her, and it was beautiful, and it was sunny, and it was March. I'm sitting going, dang, where did the wind and rain go? It's a beautiful sunny day on the ocean. I'm angry. I'm upset. And she's kind of like looking at me going, it's a beautiful sunny day on the Oregon coast in March and you're unhappy? And that's when I knew I was looking through my lenses a little bit too focused, shall we say. And we all do that. We all do that. So true awareness of oneness and what it actually means is crucial for our new view. If we truly looked at everything and saw the oneness that is within it. A true experience of compassion is what we need to bring to that. I love this morning I happened to be looking on Facebook, and a minister friend of mine posted this wonderful quote from the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. And she says, compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Compassion is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. Cynthia earlier in her talk was talking about the challenge of going through her personal hell of having Andrew die. And I was reminded of, there's a wonderful phrase that says, religion is for people who are afraid of hell, and spirituality is for people who have been there. And we are teaching of spirituality here. Okay? We have to be aware of our darkness. We all have our darkness, right? And it helps us to then be compassionate for others' darkness, not so quick to judge, and to pull back and say, wait a minute. I recognize myself in that. I look at whoever is my favorite political person right now to hate, or to be angry about, or to be upset about, and say, wait a minute. There's a part of me in that person. Okay? So when we start to look at that, it's a difference in consciousness. So let's personalize and localize this. Let's get jiggy. So to create a world that works for all, what do we have to do? We have to create a life, an individual life that works within the allness, right? Our life has to work, right? Okay? And it has to work in such a way that it works with the allness of all of life, the rest of life. So it's not just that my life works and heck with yours. It's that my life works, your life works. So we create a neighborhood that works for all, a group that works for all. And we create a spiritual center that works for all. What a great experiment. Can we create right here in Reading a spiritual center that works for all? Okay? So let's explore that. Right now we're doing this pledge program. Why? Because it takes money to run the center. Just really simple. See, spirituality is free. People say, well, why isn't it free? The spirituality is free, but if you want to meet together in a place and have lights and air conditioning and heat and running water and you know, all that stuff, it takes money. Have you noticed? I mean, your life takes some money to run, right? So the life of this center takes some money to run. I've heard that the minister won't work for free, nor will the staff. Not that they don't want to, but would you really come and listen to a homeless, ragged, starving guy delivering a sermon who smelled bad, by the way? Okay? So you want your minister to be able to have decent clothes, have a decent home, have running water and lights in his place and stuff like that, right? Okay? So that takes money. So we have to play with this idea. So, like it or not, money, Joseph Campbell called money congealed energy. And I love that term because I take the energy, whatever energy that I'm doing, and I put it into money. Okay? So I do whatever I do for a living, to bring money into my life. I put that congealed energy to it, I give it to you, and you take it and release that congealed energy in whatever way and shape you want it. Right? Which is a whole lot better than me showing up with a whole bunch of goats, hoping that you need goats in order to repair my tooth, right? It works better. It's more efficient. Money is a good idea. It's a divine idea in the mind of God. So let's look at our traditional thinking and let's see if we can create something new here. So, what are the two topics that a minister is never supposed to speak about from the pulpit? Okay, there, I heard it over here. Sex. Money and sex. Okay, politics too. I wasn't thinking of that one. Money and sex. Now that's interesting because you see, we're a teaching that says we take the best of religion, science, and philosophy and apply it to human needs and aspirations. What is more core human need and aspiration than money and sex? Okay? If you're in a how many relationships either succeed or fail based on money and sex? And if you throw communication in there as the holy triangle of relationships, if all three of those are working well, you probably have a really good relationship, right? And if one or more of them is off, you probably have a really messed up relationship, right? You've experienced this? You've noticed people who've experienced this? Okay. And yet we're not supposed to talk about two of the factors on that triangle. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So we're going to talk money. We'll talk sex next week on Valentine's Day. One year in Seattle, side story. We were in the middle of pledge drive, and Reverend Kathy Ann had to be gone for one of the weekends in there, and we were close to making our goal of what it was. And she said, and she was having a guest speaker, and generally when guest speakers came in, the attendance went down. So she said, you know, if you do make the goal next week, if you all show up and we all finish the pledge and make the goal, I will do a talk on sex. It's sort of like the reward for doing that. The funny thing was we did make the goal and she never did the talk. But anyways, I've been feeling betrayed ever since. No. So we have this teaching that wants to talk about reality, that wants to talk about life. And so I want to be able to talk about money. Now, how we look at money here is that I want you to expand your prosperity. Would you be okay with that? Now, prosperity is money, and it's more, right? You know, May McCarthy, who's coming here at the end of this month to do the path of wealth, she says wealth is well-being. So wealth is not just money. It includes, but is not limited to money. How many of you would like greater well-being in your life? Okay, anybody nod? You've got all the well-being you ever want, and you don't want to... Okay, so we're all good with that. So we have old paradigms about church and spirituality and money. Some of you have run across those. I remember I was sitting in a class last year, Karen Ramsey's Caring for Your Soul Matters of Money class, and one of the people in the class looked up and said, suddenly had this aha moment where he said, I just realized I've always believed the minister should work for free and that I shouldn't have to contribute because the minister should work for free because it's a calling and he or she should just feel called and work for free. And he became aware of how foolish that idea was, but it was like that was an old belief system that was sitting in there. And we all have these old belief systems that if I'm a spiritual person, I shouldn't want too much money or sex. We don't have a home office that pays our bills. We sink or swim here based on us. We're it. Okay, so there's no outside, savior going to come down and rescue us. And so we're playing with this idea. We're asking people to shift their consciousness about money and to shift their consciousness about their own money so that they can be in greater wealth, and then out of that share with us, with your spiritual home. And I want to talk about your spiritual home because, Cynthia alluded to that. We can give our money here, there, and everywhere, and it kind of dilutes the process and the experience of giving. Or we can say, this is my spiritual home. I know a lot of you have other places that you go to tap in for spirituality. And so, but here's the thing. If you go to the hospital tomorrow, are you going to call up Esther Hicks to come and visit you in the hospital? And do you think you'll get a response? Are you going to call up Michael Beckwith at Agape to come in, or one of his practitioners to come and visit you at the hospital? You're probably going to call this center, right? Okay? So this is your spiritual home. Got it? This is the place where you hang your hat and call home. And so I invite you to look at supporting your spiritual home just like you would support your own home first. So in our consciousness, and I want to invite us to all play together because I'm also very open to shifting consciousness of how we do money in church, okay? I'm not attached to this being the way we do it. I just want to put that up front, okay? So I want us all to hold a consciousness of something better and different than what we've done before. The traditional way, the traditional trinity of funding a church is Sunday collections, fundraisers, like we're doing with the Nourishing Our Community event, and classes, seminars, workshops, things like that. That's the traditional, that's how we get all the money we need to run the church, okay? Just about all of it. And I'm willing to have it be something different. I don't know yet what that different looks like, but I'm willing to have it be something different. But for right now, we're working with this idea of pledge program. And I want to work with it with a new way where we feel good about this. Because I know some people sit there and go, oh, you're going to talk pledge in February, I'll be back in March. I don't want to hear about this. We all, NPR radio stations or TV stations, it's like, we unplug from them for the week that they're doing pledge drives, right? Come on, I know some of you besides me do it. Okay. A pledge program, what it does is just a simple conscious choice. It says, I will give this much money. It's just a conscious choice. What it does is it puts you at conscious choice, and we're all about consciousness and expanding and developing consciousness, and then it gives the board and the budget and the people creating a budget the idea of how much they have to work with. Because if we're just shooting in the dark saying, gosh, I wonder what we're going to get, we don't know. We can't create a budget. Would you do your household? Would you work for a company that says, I'll pay you whatever I feel like it? I'm not going to tell you how much that is. Would you work for a company like that? Nope. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is be conscious about that. So the pledge is simply a request to join in giving consciously. It's just getting conscious about it. That's all that it is. And so I think that each of you has a pledge program, or a pledge book in your program. One of the things that I started to do last year was, because I believe in giving and receiving, is to give you something back for the pledge. And so if you look at your pledge program guide, on the right-hand side, there's a list of, at certain levels, you get something back. Everything from a monthly practitioner session and a free class at the upper levels to just simply a book of once-a-month treatments that we'll be giving out on the third Sunday. So on the third Sunday this month, we're going to have, if you were here last year, the opportunity for you to bring up your pledge card, put it in a bowl, the ministers, practitioners will be here to give you the gift of the pledge or the prayer booklet that has a spiritual mind treatment for each month in it for you to work with to increase your own prosperity, because I believe in increasing your own prosperity. The last Sunday of the month, we have Mae McCarthy here who will rock your world, and will, if you show up for her talk and her workshop afterwards, will definitely support you in increasing your prosperity. I know Cynthia's already got the book, a preview of the book, and she's already working with it, and she's already watching her prosperity literally in just a few days increase. She has a little business that she does on the side, and she's watched it increase. So that's what we're doing. That's what we want to play with, because I believe in giving and receiving. This week, what I want to invite you to do as a spiritual practice is take that pledge card home and sit with it. Now, I've got my pledge committee chair there who's saying, no, David, tell them to fill it out and turn it in right now. But no, I don't want you to do that, okay? Unless you are really clear. I want you to sit with it. I want you to meditate with it. I want you to ask your higher wisdom self. Remember we talked about going to that top layer first before we take the action? Ask that higher level self, what is mine to give? What is mine to give that benefits all and hurts no one, including me? And just take that home and contemplate that this week. And Sally will breathe and know that it all comes back in the right time. So that's practice number one. To literally take it home and sit with it. You can do this, by the way, for anything. Anything you have a decision about. Sit with it for a moment. Sit with it for a little bit. Number two, check within yourself, where do I have old rules about money and church or spirituality that are holding me back? We define those as emotional conflicts. You know, I get angry every time the minister talks about money, because I remember my parents were always, being hammered about money by their preacher when I was young, and they were always saying, I don't, we got to give. We don't believe in give till it hurts, by the way, okay? We believe in giving till it feels good. We also, I hate this. This is the part that I hate about religious science. We don't use guilt, because we don't believe in guilt. Okay, there's no God up there that's going to be happy if you tithe or pledge, and there's no devil down there that's going to be happy if you don't. Okay, we just have to do it based on our own personal choice. So check out any emotional conflicts, stuff where really emotionally icky, or mental blocks, old belief systems, and see if you can free yourself up from that. And then the third practice is, am I willing to have a new paradigm about money in my own life? Am I willing to experience enoughness? And am I willing to experience having money in a way that benefits all the world? Okay? So that's our three spiritual practices. Number one, take the card home and just sit with it and be with it and ask Spirit, ask your inner wisdom self, ask whatever it is you want to call it. What is mine to give that will bless me and bless everyone else? Number two, just notice any emotional conflicts or mental blocks, old belief systems, old chatter that comes up about that. And number three, open up to your own enoughness and your own being a part of a whole, part of a oneness that is thriving. Because the last I checked, Spirit is thriving. Right? Spirit is thriving. Now, that doesn't mean that in the world everybody's thriving, because not everybody's that deeply in touch with Spirit. But Spirit is thriving, and that is available to all of us. So we play with that. I'm going to close with a reading from Sharif Abdullah's book, Creating a World That Works for All, that we've been working with. And it's an example of things that work differently than we think they should work. How's that? So he's in Sri Lanka. He's working with an organization that is helping Sri Lanka rebuild. That's called the Sarvodaya camp, okay? And they meet every day for lunch. They get together every day for lunch. And it says, in the canteen, foreigners are treated differently from the native Sri Lankans. To summarize the differences, foreigners, which are visitors and workers, eat from china plates. Sri Lankans eat from wide, shallow bowls made of metal. 2 foreigners get served at a special table reserved for them. Sri Lankans eat at all the other tables. Number 3, foreigners are served family style from platters of food. Generally, they have twice as much food available as any human being could possibly eat. If eating alone, a person is served enough food for 2 on the platters. A group of 6 is served enough for 12. Sri Lankans get their food by going to the kitchen door where they are given a plate heaped with rice and all the same curries that are found on the foreigner's table. If they're still hungry after eating their first serving, they simply go back to the kitchen door for another plate of food. Okay? He says, after observing this system carefully, I came to the conclusion that it provided the best way to serve a large group of people representing different cultures, different gastronomic capacities and tastes, and different eating styles and habits. Some Westerners, especially Americans who have been through diversity training, see things differently. They loudly protest the privileges of having more food, china plates, and table services. A few, totally disregarding Sri Lankan culture and courtesy, will try to get their food in the kitchen line, which confuses everybody. Because it is a Sri Lankan custom to offer abundant food and hospitality to guests, the Americans who try to be culturally correct will still find a china plate and generous servings waiting for them after they have stood in line for a Sri Lankan plate. I remind the Western guests who want to reject their perceived privileges in food distribution that the system works for the Sri Lankans. Okay? It works for the Sri Lankans, even though we don't like it. Our work here is to create a world that works for all. To create, and what he talks about is everybody has enough. Everybody has enough food. If you traded places, you'd still be okay. You might not like or prefer it, but you would still be okay. The Sri Lankans would be uncomfortable but okay with china plates. Okay? And it benefits everyone. Everyone, nobody goes away hungry. Everybody has plenty of food, plenty of all they need, and feels good when they walk away. That's the system we're looking to create in the world. That's the system we're looking to create in this center. And it doesn't necessarily look like what you and I oftentimes think it should look like. And so we have to be open. Is this system working? Does it provide enough for everybody? Can we interchange? Can we have it working as an overall benefit for everyone? So I want to invite you to join me in creating that. And if you have ideas on how to do the creation of the money and whatever that it takes for us, and by the way, when I say money, it also includes what we call sacred service or seva, because in addition to working from or needing money to support the center, we need people to actually do things, right? We have these beautiful grounds to maintain, we have a church to clean, we have all this stuff, we have, office staff needs help, all sorts of stuff. So all of this, how can I contribute to my spiritual home? And if you have a better way of doing that, of inviting people to do that, I am wide open to hearing it. But for right now, for this month, we're going to play with this idea of pledge program. We have a beautiful lotus flower out there. We're going to continue to color it in as the pledges come in, so you have an idea for how that's doing. We have a goal for pledging of $200,000 for this year. We brought in $176,000, just over $176,000 worth of actual pledge money came in last year. So we're stretching that as about 12% increase in that, because we're trying to back off of the number of fundraisers we do. Some of you have told me you're tired of fundraisers, right? Okay, and so I would rather not hammer away and hammer away and hammer away about money. And you probably notice I don't do that from the pulpit anyways. But I'd rather not have us as a community trying to do that. And so what that takes is a different way of doing prosperity and abundance for all of this community. Are you with me on that? Okay. So I invite you to, even if like me, you don't know what it is, to hold the consciousness that it reveals itself. The highest and greatest way to support this community. Maybe revolutionary, maybe evolutionary, maybe something new, maybe just feeling better about what we're doing unfolds itself. And so as it does so in us as a community, guess whose life it does also? It does so in each of your lives. Because this community is us individually and collectively. So let's just know that for the highest and greatest good for us, and then that it projects out into the world. And we do the world differently than we've been doing it. Let's move into prayer. So I know that there is one infinite presence, pure love, pure wholeness, pure abundant good. That infinite presence being all that there is. And it seeks to manifest itself in form. And so it manifests itself as us. Consciousness personified. The we are ourselves all the aspects of God individualized into form. We are each one with the other, and yet individualized from each other. We tap into the same mind, but we use it individually. And so knowing that this is the truth of each of us, I know that each of us this week manifests good in our lives in whatever form is being called for, whatever form our hearts truly desire, in the most beautiful, perfect, and joyous ways possible, in alignment with Spirit, in alignment with the allness, the oneness of all. I know this process unfolds naturally and easily because it is a natural and easy process when we work in alignment with Spirit. And so I know that each of us says yes to being in alignment with Spirit, even if we don't yet even know what that looks like. We say yes to the willingness and the idea of being in alignment with our highest and greatest good, with spiritual principle. And out of that, we create new and fresh experiences that take us to a greater and greater experience of the divine nature of good, right here and right now. And for this, I give thanks. For each of us who is willing to play with this, I give thanks. For each of us who is opening up to a greater and greater idea of expressing as Spirit, I give thanks. I call all of this good. And I release this word into the law, which moves it from word into form in our lives here and now. And so it does. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.